Hello class, welcome to lesson 13. So this week is all about giving back, which is a fun lesson to focus on. There's a couple of things I want to go over in lesson 13 pretty briefly, and then I also want to go over a couple of things for lesson 14, which is next week, because next week is our final week and we're going to be having a final quiz and a final reflection, and these are things that you will need to start preparing for now, or you won't have quite enough time to do them next week. Okay, so stay tuned. We'll get to lesson 14. So the first thing I want to point out is here in our lesson material and quiz. We have a lot of readings and videos to look through this week. They're all good, so I hope that you enjoy them. And I want to point out in particular this talk by Kim B. Clark, who was a president of BYU Idaho and is now a 70 and heavily involved in the creation of Pathway. So pretty neat talk from him. I have already got it pulled up over here. So this is an important one for you to focus in on because our application activity will be centered on his talk. So make sure that you're not so done reading by the time you get to his that you skip over it. Make sure that you read it and you pay close attention because we will be focusing on it. So now, if we skip over to the application activity instructions, I will show you how it is centered on his talk. So first it has you read another talk just to get more context on what entitlement and pride involve. And then it says, it asks you to look over these questions that President Clark asks in his talk, and then to respond to how you feel you fit on the entitlement scale. So let's look at his talk really briefly. His talk focuses on entitlement, and as you go through the template that you need to fill out for the application activity, it will ask you about these different questions you're looking at, and at the end it says, consider times in your life when you have felt entitled. What thoughts or behaviors triggered your feelings of entitlement? How will you overcome the temptation to feel entitled? So notice entitlement is a huge part of this application activity, and in the past I have had students take entitlement to mean something different than what we are focusing on in this lesson. So make sure that as you read through his talk that you notice how he is defining entitlement. Here he says, it means we have an attitude and belief that the world owes us what we want. Later he says, they believe they are entitled to special treatment and special privileges. They want something for nothing. So basically entitlement is believing that you should receive special treatment. And this is a common belief in the world today, but not one that really helps us be self-reliant or to be humble or grateful. So that's the type of entitlement we are focusing on. I've had students in the past looking at it differently, and that's kind of defeated the point of the application activity. The application activity is focused on how can I overcome feelings of pride and entitlement in my life, feelings of pride or entitlement that are holding me back and are making me a less happy and Christ-like person. So we're looking for ways to move those feelings out of our lives. Okay? If you have any questions about entitlement, please just ask me because I have seen it misunderstood in past classes. So with that being clarified, we're going to be focusing on these questions that help us see if we have this spirit of entitlement in our life by asking ourselves, am I overly critical of others? Do I look down on others? Do I use the word deserve a lot? I deserve this or I don't deserve that. So as you read through these questions, some of them might resonate pretty deeply and you'll say, oh, I actually have felt that one before. I know for me, there are a couple here that hit home for me. So if one hits home, pay attention to that one. Let's say it's number 2. So then as you go down here, it asks you to just pick 3 different selections to read from the following. So if number 2 hit home for me, I'm going to focus on question 2. So I might pick these 2 to look at. I might read these 2 little excerpts and think about the questions. And then over here in the application activity, I would respond to them. So for selection 1, which for me would be this first question 2, that we might not shrink, I would answer the questions, what is the title of the selection? It's that they might not shrink. I would respond to what did I learn from reading this selection, and how does this principle apply to me? How is it going to help me overcome negative feelings of entitlement in my life? And then what specific changes will I make to move away from feelings of entitlement as I align my life with this principle? So what actions can I take away from that selection? So you'll do that for 3 different selections that you feel that you want to read. Okay, and then you'll answer the final question about entitlement in general. So that's lesson 13. If you have any questions, please let me know, because I want this to be a helpful lesson, not a confusing lesson. So as normal, you'll upload the template on the next page and complete the other assignments as normal. All right, now let's look at lesson 14. This is the big concluding lesson. So the reason I'm going over it now is because everything will be due on Wednesday and Thursday for this lesson. Not this Wednesday and Thursday, next Wednesday and Thursday. But my point is you don't have a full week to work on it like usual. So I want you to start thinking and preparing for these assignments now if you have time, so that they aren't so overwhelming for you. There are 2 main assignments I want to briefly talk about. The first is personal revelation. Personal revelation just has a few readings, and then there's a brief little assignment where you reflect on it. So that one is not is not going to be overwhelming. It will be very simple and not too time consuming. I want to focus on the final course reflection and then the final exam. So the final course reflection, which will be due Tuesday of lesson 14, not Tuesday, Wednesday, forgive me, my brain is tired, is where you review main concepts from each lesson, and you go back and think through what was the most important thing you want to remember from that lesson. So if you remember, we've actually been answering that question each week in our learning report. Each week in the learning report, it says, what is the most important thing you want to remember? And you've written up a little response for every single lesson. So this reflection is basically going to be a compilation of those responses that you've written. So what it asks you to do here is to go back and review your learning reports from lessons 2 through 13, since lesson 1 was mostly getting to know iLearn and lesson 14 is our conclusion. It's just 2 through 13 that we need to look at. To go look at those lesson reports and to go find your answer on what was the most important thing that you learned from each lesson, and to be ready to copy and paste those answers into your final course reflection, which it will allow you to do on the next page. So, and you are allowed to change these responses, so it even shows you what you're going to be responding to. For each lesson, you'll be responding, what is the most important thing you want to remember, and why is this the most important thing? So maybe the thing I wrote back for lesson 2, I no longer feel good about. I look at it and say, oh, actually, there was something more important that I learned from that lesson. Feel free to change your response. That's completely fine. But what I would encourage you to do if you are short on time and are worried about turning this in by Wednesday is to start going back and collecting those answers from your learning reports. So you get there by following these steps. Going to My Grades at the top of the screen, clicking on Class Progress, and then once you're in Class Progress, there will be a sidebar, and there will be quizzes somewhere down here, and you click on quizzes, and then you can scroll through all the lessons, and you can see under lesson 2, under every single lesson, there will be a learning report, and when you click on the learning report, it will say details under it, and when you click on details and then attempt 1, it will let you see what your answers are. And you can copy out the answer to the question, what was the most important thing you learned from this lesson? So you could collect all of those responses in a Word document or in a notepad so that you are ready to copy and paste them into this final course reflection, or to modify them if you feel that there's something else important that you learned. Okay, so that's one thing you could be preparing for. The other thing that you should most definitely be preparing for is this final exam. So there's a final practice exam, which is just a practice test. You will not, whatever grade you receive on the practice test will not affect your real grade at all. This is just for practice, though the questions on the practice test are different than the actual final exam. But this final exam is a compilation of everything we've learned through the entire semester. So if you have been reviewing your notes as it asks you to in the learning report, that will be a huge help for you. Also, if you have taken notes on different videos and scriptures where it has asked you to take notes, those will be invaluable. So to prepare for the final quiz, I would encourage you to go collect any notes you have taken throughout the semester for this class and to review those notes so that you feel ready to use them. I believe this is an open note quiz. Yes, you can use any of your written notes on this quiz. That means written or typed up, but nothing beyond that. No quick Google searches, no turning to your friend and asking what they remember, none of that, just using your own personal notes. So become familiar with those notes, make sure that you can use them to your benefit on this exam. And I would encourage you to just quickly review each lesson material again to make sure that you remember the main concepts, that you remember the different study techniques we've learned, that you remember the different Mormon messages we've watched and any key points that were in them. And again, if you've taken notes on these, then that will make a huge difference to you because you'll have that in your class. And feel free to take notes as you review, and you can use those in the quiz. Okay? So there's something to start reviewing for. Don't get too panicked. It is a pretty detailed quiz, but as long as you've been paying attention throughout the semester and have been taking notes and can use your notes, you have a pretty good chance of doing well. So just make sure you're reviewing this week and perhaps looking through those reflections, like I said, not reflections, the learning report where you reflect on the lesson, that one. And you should be ready to go. So there's a few things to look out for this week. Let me know if you have any questions.